Chapter 1. The Recording. I pressed pause on the audio file and stared at my computer screen. 23 years of marriage, and this was how I found out. Tonight, yeah, that sounds good. We have some kind of other thing going on. My husband's voice, casual as ordering coffee, talking to another woman about Christmas gifts, while I sat 30 feet away in our kitchen, wrapping presents for his mother. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 15 years building surveillance systems for corporate clients, designing networks that could catch embezzling accountants and cheating business partners. I could track digital footprints, analyze metadata, and follow money trails that led straight to boardroom betrayals. But somehow, I'd never thought to turn those skills on my own home. Until 3 weeks ago, when David started acting like a stranger. Chapter 2. The Pattern. Recognition. 3 weeks earlier, I was reviewing security footage for Meridian Financial when I noticed something that made me pause. A pattern in the data that felt familiar. The way their CFO's keycard access showed late-night entries, always on days when his calendar showed client dinners. The way his phone GPS data never quite matched his expense reports. It reminded me of something. David, coming home at 11 p.m. from client meetings that used to end by 9. David, whose phone suddenly required a passcode after 8 years of lying face-up on our nightstand. David, who'd started buying groceries at a different store, one that happened to be 5 miles closer to the east side of town, where he had no business being. I'm good at patterns. It's what I do for a living. And the pattern I was seeing looked exactly like the one that had cost Meridian Financial $3 million. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I started watching my husband the way I'd watch any other target. Chapter 3. The investigation begins. Day 1 of active surveillance. December 3rd, 2024. I installed a GPS tracker on David's Audi, the same military-grade device I used for client work. Cost, $400. Peace of mind, invaluable. His route to the office took exactly 18 minutes. His route home took 37 minutes and included a 20-minute stop at Riverside Elementary School. Curious, since we have no children of elementary age. Our daughter Emma is 26 and lives in Portland. Day 3. I cross-referenced the GPS data with his credit card statements. 2 charges at Romano's Italian restaurant in the past month. I've been asking him to take me to Romano's for our anniversary for 3 years. He always said it was too expensive. Day 7. I used facial recognition software from my corporate toolkit to scan his social media connections. Found her in 4 seconds. Mary Catherine Brennan, 34, elementary school teacher at Riverside Elementary. Recently divorced. Posted photos of a new pasta obsession at Romano's 3 weeks ago. She was beautiful in that effortless way that made my carefully applied makeup feel like war paint. Dark hair, bright smile, the kind of woman who probably jogged for fun and never counted calories. I studied her photo for exactly 90 seconds, then closed the laptop. I had work to do. Chapter 4. Digital Footprints. The thing about surveillance is that people think it's about following cars and hiding in bushes. In reality, modern infidelity lives in the digital space. Phone records, bank statements, social media metadata, all of it leaves traces, and I know how to read them. I pulled David's cell phone records using a corporate subpoena tool I'd forgotten to return to my last client. Completely illegal, but remarkably effective. The pattern was stunning in its predictability. Daily texts to a number registered to M. Brennan, starting exactly 6 months ago. Phone calls every Tuesday and Thursday at 3:15 p.m. Right when elementary schools dismiss. Weekend calls lasting 2 to 3 hours while I was at my book club or visiting my sister. The most damning piece, a text from December 1st that read, "Can't wait for you to meet my friend from work. You'll love her sense of humor." I was apparently the friend from work. I called Emma that night. "Mom, you sound weird. Is everything okay?" "Define okay," I said, staring out the kitchen window at David's car in the driveway. The same car that had been visiting elementary school parking lots for 3 months. Did Dad do something? Emma has always been perceptive. Even as a child, she could sense tension in a room before the adults acknowledged it themselves. "I think your father is having an affair." Silence, then. "What do you need me to do?" This is why I love my daughter. No gasps of shock, no denial, no demands for proof. Just immediate loyalty and practical support. "I need you to come home for Christmas," I said, "and I need you to trust me with something that might get complicated. I'm booking a flight tonight." Chapter 5, The Setup. Emma arrived on December 10th with the focused energy of someone ready for war. She's a litigation attorney in Portland, specializing in corporate fraud cases. She inherited my talent for pattern recognition and her father's gift for persuasive argument. The combination makes her devastating in a courtroom. "Show me what you have," she said, dropping her suitcase in the hallway. I spread the evidence across the dining room table like a war map. GPS tracking data, phone records, credit card statements, social media analytics. 3 weeks of methodical documentation. Emma studied it with the same intensity she brought to depositions. "This is thorough," she said finally, "and completely inadmissible in divorce court." "I'm not planning to use it in divorce court." She looked up. "What are you planning?" I had been working on this question for 3 weeks. The answer came to me while watching David lie about working late again, while his GPS tracker showed him parked outside Mary Brennan's apartment complex. "I'm going to give him exactly what he's asking for," I said. "A public confrontation with his girlfriend. I'm just going to make sure it happens at the most inconvenient possible moment." Emma smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Tell me more." Chapter 6, The Christmas Program. December 15th. I discovered that Mary Brennan was directing the Riverside Elementary Christmas program scheduled for December 22nd at 7 p.m. The same program David had suddenly announced he couldn't attend because of a work emergency. December 16th, I bought tickets to the Christmas program. All proceeds benefited the school's arts education fund. How civic-minded of me. December 17th, I used my corporate social engineering skills to call the school and volunteer to help with the program setup. They were thrilled to have a parent willing to assist with the technical aspects of the presentation. I didn't mention that David and I have no children at the school. December 18th, I conducted a site visit to review the auditorium's AV capabilities. The lighting board was computerized, controlled by a tablet interface. The sound system could be operated remotely via Bluetooth. The security cameras covered every angle of the auditorium and fed directly to the principal's office. Perfect. December 19th, I tested the remote access protocols for the lighting and sound systems. Everything worked beautifully. I also confirmed that the security cameras could be accessed via the school's wireless network, provided you had the right credentials. I had the right credentials. December 20th, I created a small script that would allow me to control the auditorium's technical systems from my phone. Not malicious, just convenient. December 21st. I told David I had decided to attend the elementary school Christmas program after all. I heard they're doing something special this year, I said. I thought it might be nice to go together. He went very still. I told you I have that work emergency. Oh, right, the Prometheus deal, I said, using the name of a client he'd mentioned weeks ago. Didn't that close on Monday? It's complicated. New issues came up. Of course they did. I smiled and kissed his cheek. Don't worry, honey, I understand completely. Chapter 7. Showtime. December 22nd, 6:45 p.m. I arrived at Riverside Elementary wearing my best black dress and the pearls David bought me for our 20th anniversary. Emma sat in the back row, laptop open, pretending to answer emails. The auditorium was full of families, grandparents, and teachers. Mary Brennan stood at the side of the stage, beautiful and animated, wearing a red velvet dress that made her look like Christmas morning. 6:58 p.m. David's Audi pulled into the school parking lot. I watched him through the lobby windows as he parked in a spot clearly marked, staff only. 7 p.m. Exactly. The lights dimmed and the Christmas program began. It was actually quite good. Third graders singing Silent Night with voices like angels. Fourth graders performing a surprisingly sophisticated nativity scene. Mary Brennan moved through it all with the confidence of someone who loved her work. 7:23 p.m. David entered through the back doors during a musical interlude, scanning the crowd. He spotted Mary immediately, his face lighting up with the expression I hadn't seen in months. The expression he used to reserve for me. 7:24 p.m. I opened my phone and accessed the lighting control app. 7:25 p.m. The kindergarten class took the stage for their big number, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Mary walked to the front of the auditorium to get a better view, positioning herself directly in the spotlight's path. 7:27 p.m. I waited for the song's climax, the moment when little Susie Chen hit the high note in Then How the Reindeer Loved Him, and made my move. The spotlight, instead of staying on the children, swung smoothly to the left and illuminated Mary Brennan in the aisle, frozen like a deer. She looked confused but not panicked. The audience chuckled, thinking it was part of the show. 7:28 p.m. I activated the backup spotlight and aimed it directly at David, still standing in the back doorway, staring at Mary with obvious longing. Now the audience was murmuring. 2 spotlights on adults instead of children was clearly not part of the program. 7:29 p.m. I opened the microphone channel and stood up. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's sound system. "I apologize for interrupting this beautiful program. But I've just realized that we have some special guests tonight who deserve recognition." Mary looked toward the sound booth, confused. David had gone completely white. "You see, my husband David thought he had a work emergency tonight. But as you can see, he managed to make it after all." I gestured toward the spotlight, illuminating him. "And I'd like everyone to meet Mary Brennan, the wonderful teacher who's been helping him with his overtime." The silence was profound. Chapter 8. The Revelation. I walked down the aisle toward Mary, who stood frozen in the spotlight, like a butterfly pinned to a board. The microphone in my hand felt like a weapon of precision. "Mary, you've been so kind to spend time with David these past 6 months. All those Tuesday and Thursday afternoon conversations, all those romantic dinners at Romano's. I have to ask, did he mention he was married?" She found her voice. Yes, he said he was getting divorced." The auditorium had become an amphitheater. Every parent and teacher hanging on our words. Someone in the back row was recording with their phone. The kindergartners on stage looked between Mary and me like spectators at a tennis match. "Divorced?" I turned toward David, still caught in the harsh circle of light. "When exactly were we getting divorced, honey? Was that before or after you used our joint credit card to buy her Christmas presents?" David opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I looked back at Mary, who had begun to cry. "Here's what I don't understand, Mary. You seem like a smart woman, educated. You work with children, for God's sake. Didn't you think it was strange that a man getting divorced was still living in the same house as his wife? Still wearing his wedding ring, still sharing a bank account? He said it was complicated. Oh, it's about to get very simple." I pulled out my phone and opened the photo app. "David, do you remember this picture?" I held it up for the audience to see on the auditorium's projection screen. "This is from our cruise to Alaska in September. 3 months ago, notice anything unusual? The matching anniversary t-shirts? The way you're kissing me on the deck of the ship?" The photo filled the screen behind the kindergartners. 40 feet of David and me, looking blissfully happy under the midnight sun. "This one's even better." I swiped to the next photo. "This is from Thanksgiving 3 weeks ago. There's David carving the turkey at our dining room table. There's our daughter Emma, and there's me, your supposedly estranged wife, sitting in the exact spot I've occupied for 23 years. Mary was openly sobbing now. Several parents had stood up, unsure whether to stay for the drama or protect their children from it. "And this," I said, swiping to the final photo, "is from last Tuesday afternoon. David's car, parked outside Riverside Elementary at 3:15 p.m. The same day he told me he was in meetings until 6. I looked directly at David. "How many meetings do you attend in elementary school parking lots, sweetheart?" Chapter 9. The Confession. David finally found his voice. "Catherine, please, not here, not like this." "Not like what? Not in public, not in front of witnesses?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You've been conducting your affair in public for 6 months. You've been lying to me in public. every time someone asked about your weekend plans or your late nights at the office. You've made me a fool in public at every dinner party and family gathering where I defended your absences. I turned to address the audience directly. How many of you have children in Mary's class? About 20 hands went up. And how many of you have seen my husband at school events this year? 15 hands stayed up. Interesting. Because according to David, he's never been to this school in his life. The murmuring in the crowd grew louder. I could see parents whispering to each other, putting pieces together. Mrs. Patterson from the front row, whose daughter was in Mary's class, was staring at David with undisguised recognition. Mrs. Peterson, I said, addressing her directly. Didn't you mention at the grocery store last month that David had volunteered to help with the book fair? You said, what a wonderful husband I had. How lucky I was to have a man so involved in education. Mrs. Peterson nodded slowly. He said he was Miss Brennan's assistant. We thought he worked here. He does work here, just not in an official capacity. I walked back toward David, the spotlight following me. The thing about surveillance, David, is that it reveals patterns. And your pattern has been remarkably consistent. Every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 months. Every weekend when I had plans. Every evening when you claimed to be working late. I stopped directly in front of him. The only variable was me. How long did you think you could keep this up? How long did you think it would take me to notice that my husband had essentially moved out of our marriage while still sleeping in our bed? Catherine, I can explain. Explain what? That you fell in love with someone else. That happens, David. People fall out of love every day. But you didn't just fall out of love with me. You created an entire false reality where you could have both lives simultaneously. You let Mary think I was your ex-wife while you let me think I was still your current one. I looked at Mary, who had sunk into a nearby chair. How long did he tell you we'd been separated? 2 years, she whispered. 2 years. I repeated this for the benefit of the auditorium. David, we went to marriage counseling 8 months ago. We renewed our vows at the counselor's suggestion. Do you remember that ceremony? It was small, just family. But we exchanged new rings. You cried during your vows. I held up my left hand, showing the new wedding band. Do separated couples typically renew their vows, Mary? She shook her head, looking like she might be sick. No, they don't. Chapter 10. The Reckoning. The kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Williams, had quietly ushered the children off stage and into the hallway. The auditorium now belonged entirely to adults and the wreckage of 2 relationships. Principal Morrison approached the microphone, clearly trying to regain control of his school's Christmas program. Perhaps we should move this discussion to a more private. No. My voice carried absolute authority. This discussion began in private 6 months ago, when David decided to pursue another woman while remaining married to me. It continued in private through dozens of lies and deceptions. I think we've had enough privacy. I faced the audience again. I want everyone here to understand something. This isn't about jealousy. This isn't about a woman scorned. This is about the methodical destruction of trust by someone who thought he was clever enough to manage two separate realities. I opened my phone again and pulled up the bank statements. David, would you like to tell everyone how you paid for those dinners at Romano's, the hotel room in Ashford, the Christmas presents you bought Mary last weekend? His silence was answer enough. Joint credit card, joint bank account. My signature is on every transaction because we've been married for 23 years and I trusted my husband to make reasonable financial decisions. I turned to Mary. Did you think it was strange that a divorced man had so much disposable income? No alimony payments, no child support obligations. Just endless money for romantic dinners and weekend getaways. I didn't think about it. Of course you didn't. Because David made sure you didn't have to think about anything uncomfortable. He created a perfect fantasy for you where he was the ideal man, single, successful, available. All you had to do was enjoy it. I looked back at David. But fantasies require maintenance, don't they? They require increasingly elaborate lies. How exhausting it must have been, keeping track of which version of your life you were living at any given moment. The audience was completely silent now. Even the children's voices from the hallway had faded. I have recordings, I said quietly. Phone conversations, voice messages, video surveillance. 6 months of evidence that shows exactly how this relationship developed and how many lies were required to sustain it. David's face went ashen. Catherine, please. We can work this out. Work what out? Our marriage. The marriage you've been pretending doesn't exist for half a year. Or your relationship with Mary. The relationship built entirely on deception and fraud. I moved closer to him, lowering my voice so the audience had to strain to hear. Here's what's going to happen, David. You're going to choose. Right now. In front of all these witnesses. Are you married to me? Or are you available to date Mary? It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You can't be both. You can't be the devoted husband who renews his vows and the single man pursuing a new relationship. You can't use our shared resources to finance your affair and then claim you're not financially entangled with me. Bon? I stepped back and raised my voice. So choose. Are you my husband or are you Mary's boyfriend? The question hung in the air like a sword. Chapter 11, The Choice. David looked between Mary and me like a man facing execution. The entire auditorium waited. He started and stopped. Catherine, I love you, but stop. I held up my hand. Don't love me but anything. If you love me, act like it. If you don't love me, be honest about it. But don't insult everyone's intelligence with conditional love. Mary had stood up from her chair, mascara streaking her face. David, just tell her the truth. Tell her you want a divorce. The truth? I turned to Mary. The truth is that David has never once mentioned divorce to me. Not once. He's renewed our vows, planned our summer vacation, and signed a new mortgage refinance in the past 8 months. Does that sound like a man who wants a divorce? I pulled out a piece of paper from my purse. This is the mortgage refinance document signed 3 weeks ago. Both our signatures. 30-year commitment. David, why would you sign a 30-year mortgage with someone you're planning to divorce? He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I'll tell you why. Because David doesn't want a divorce. David wants to have his cake and eat it too. He wants the security and stability of our marriage, and the excitement and novelty of a new relationship. He wants our joint bank account to fund his romantic adventures, while he tells his girlfriend that he's emotionally available. I looked at Mary with something approaching sympathy. Mary, you're not the other woman. You're the victim of an elaborate con game. David has been defrauding both of us. That's not, David started. That's not what, I interrupted. Not fraud. You've been using resources belonging to our marriage to pursue another relationship. You've been representing yourself as single while legally and financially committed to someone else. In business, we call that fraud. In marriage, we call it betrayal. Emma had appeared at my side, though I didn't see her approach. Mom, I think that's enough. No, sweetheart. I think we're just getting started. I looked at David. You still haven't chosen. Husband or boyfriend, which are you? The silence stretched until I thought it might break. Finally, David spoke. I want to try to save our marriage. Mary made a sound like she'd been slapped. Interesting choice, I said. Unfortunately, I no longer want to be married to someone who thinks marriage is a part-time commitment. I turned to address the auditorium one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience during this unscheduled portion of tonight's program. I want you all to remember what you've seen here. This is what deception looks like. This is what betrayal sounds like. And this is what it looks like when someone finally decides to stop pretending that lies can be love. I handed the microphone to Principal Morrison and walked toward the exit. Emma followed. As we reached the lobby, I could hear David calling my name. I didn't turn around. Mom, Emma said, as we stepped into the cold December air. That was the most devastating thing I've ever witnessed. Good, I said. It was supposed to be. Chapter 12, The Aftermath. The video was online within 2 hours. Someone, probably Mrs. Peterson's teenage daughter, had recorded the entire confrontation and posted it to TikTok with the caption, "Christmas program takes wild turn." By midnight, it had 50,000 views. By morning, it had gone viral. I discovered this when Emma brought me coffee and her laptop. Mom, you need to see this. The video had been picked up by local news stations, relationship blogs, and social media accounts dedicated to exposing cheaters. The comments ranged from supportive, queen energy, to critical, could have been handled privately, to vengeful. Someone find Mary's social media. I closed the laptop. How's your father? Sleeping in his car in the driveway. He's been out there since we got home. I looked through the kitchen window. David's Audi sat in our driveway like a defeated animal, windows fogged with his breathing. Has he tried to come inside? 3 times. I told him you needed space to think. Smart girl. I did need space to think, but not about reconciliation. I needed space to plan the next phase of my life. Emma, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Do you think I was too harsh last night? She considered this carefully. I think you were exactly as harsh as someone who spent 6 months being systematically lied to has a right to be. But now you have to decide what comes next. You've exposed him. You've humiliated him. You've probably ended his relationship with Mary. The question is, what do you want your life to look like going forward? This was why I loved my daughter. She could see past the drama to the practical questions. I want a divorce, I said. I want half of everything we built together. I want him to understand that actions have consequences. And I want to never again feel like a fool for trusting someone who didn't deserve it. Then that's what we'll make happen. She opened her laptop again. I've been researching divorce attorneys in the area. I have 3 recommendations, all with experience in high-asset cases involving infidelity. How high-asset? The house, your business, his practice, retirement accounts, investment portfolio. We're talking about roughly $2 million in marital assets. I had built my security company from nothing over 15 years. David's dental practice was profitable, but not spectacular. Together we had accumulated the kind of wealth that made divorce expensive. What about evidence? Emma smiled. Everything you collected is inadmissible in court, but it's excellent leverage for settlement negotiations. David knows what he did. He knows you can prove it. He also knows that his professional reputation in this community is now completely dependent on how gracefully he handles the divorce. A knock at the kitchen door interrupted us. David stood outside, holding a gas station coffee cup and looking like he'd aged a decade overnight. "Should I let him in?" Emma asked. "Yes. It's time to have an adult conversation." Chapter 13. Negotiations. David sat at our kitchen table like a supplicant in his own home. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled from sleeping in the car. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. "Catherine, I know you're angry." "I'm not angry, David. I'm done. There's a difference." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "You can't mean that. 23 years, Catherine. We can get past this." "Can we?" How do we get past 6 months of systematic deception? How do we get past the fact that you were willing to use our joint resources to fund an affair? How do we get past the fact that you destroyed another woman's trust in the process? Mary knew I was married. Mary knew you said you were getting divorced. That's not the same thing as knowing you were married. I sat across from him, maintaining eye contact. "David, you constructed an elaborate alternate reality where you could have 2 completely different lives. That's not a mistake. That's not a moment of weakness. That's a calculated strategy that required months of planning and execution." Emma placed a legal pad on the table. "Dad, Mom has asked me to help her understand her options for moving forward." David looked between us. "You want a divorce. I want honesty," I said. "For the first time in 6 months, I want complete honesty. Do you love Mary?" He was quiet for a long time. "Yes." "Do you love me?" Longer silence. "I thought I did. I'm confused about everything right now." "Fair enough. Here's what I know. I can't be married to someone who thinks love is a renewable resource that can be distributed to multiple people without consequences. I can't trust someone who has demonstrated such an elaborate capacity for deception. I leaned forward. Most importantly, I can't stay in a marriage with someone who made me complicit in his affair by using our shared resources to fund it. I'll pay it back. David, you spent our money on another woman's Christmas presents. You used our credit card to pay for hotel rooms where you had sex with someone else. You turned me into an unwilling financier of your infidelity. My voice remained calm, but the words hit him like physical blows. How do you pay that back? Emma slid the legal pad toward him. Dad, we've prepared a preliminary settlement proposal. Mom wants to make this as simple as possible. David read the document, his face growing paler with each line. You want the house. I want half of everything, which includes the house. You can buy out my interest if you want to keep it. The business, I built that business from nothing while supporting your dental practice through its first 3 years. Yes, I want the business. This would leave me with almost nothing. Emma spoke for the first time. Dad, you had almost nothing 23 years ago when you married Mom. You'll be fine. He looked up at me. What about the possibility of working things out? I had been waiting for this question. David, answer me honestly. If I hadn't caught you, how long would you have continued seeing Mary? He was quiet. If the Christmas program hadn't happened, if I hadn't discovered your affair, would you be planning to leave me for her? More silence. Or would you have just continued managing 2 relationships indefinitely? When he finally answered, his voice was barely audible. I don't know. That's the problem. You don't know because you never intended to choose. You wanted both. Consequences be damned. I stood up from the table. I can't rebuild a marriage with someone who was never fully committed to ending his affair. Chapter 14. Moving forward. 3 months later, I was sitting in my new office downtown, reviewing the Meridian financial case that had started this entire journey. The settlement with David had been finalized the week before. The house was sold, the assets divided, the business transferred entirely to my name. Emma had moved back to Portland, but not before helping me design the new office space. Clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a conference room equipped with the latest surveillance technology. Business had tripled since the Christmas program video went viral. Apparently, there was significant demand for a private investigator who specialized in infidelity cases and wasn't afraid of public confrontation. My phone rang. Catherine Walsh Investigations. Is this the woman from the Christmas program video? I had learned to handle these calls with humor. This is Catherine Walsh. How can I help you? My name is Jennifer Morris. I think my husband is cheating, and I want to hire someone who will catch him the way you caught yours. Mrs. Morris, what I did to my husband was personal. What I do for clients is professional. Those are very different things. But you'll help me find out the truth? I'll help you document the truth. What you do with that information is entirely up to you. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and reviewed the morning's agenda. 2 new client consultations, a surveillance report to complete, and lunch with Emma, who was in town for a deposition. The lunch was celebratory. Emma had just made partner at her firm, and I had just signed a contract with a major corporation to overhaul their internal security protocols. How are you feeling about everything? she asked, as we shared dessert at the restaurant that used to be David's favorite. Which everything? The divorce, the business, the fact that I'm apparently internet famous for destroying a Christmas program. All of it. I considered the question. I feel like I'm finally living in reality instead of managing someone else's fantasy. I feel like I have control over my own life for the first time in years. Any regrets? About the public nature of the confrontation? Sometimes about exposing David's lies? Never. What about Mary? This was harder to answer. I feel sorry for Mary. She was lied to as much as I was. But I also think she needed to understand that actions have consequences. David didn't exist in a vacuum. His choices affected real people, and pretending otherwise doesn't help anyone. Emma nodded. Have you heard from Dad? He sends birthday cards and Christmas cards. Very polite, very distant. I heard through mutual friends that he's in therapy. Good for him. I hope he learns something useful about himself. I hope he becomes a better man for whoever comes next. Very mature of you. I'm not trying to be mature. I'm trying to be honest. I spent 6 months living with a lie. I don't intend to waste any more time on dishonesty, including my own. We walked back to my office in comfortable silence. The spring afternoon was warm and the downtown area was busy with people enjoying lunch breaks and shopping. Mom, Emma said as we reached my building, I'm proud of you. For what? For refusing to pretend that betrayal is acceptable, for demanding better, for showing me what it looks like when someone decides to stop accepting less than they deserve. I hugged my daughter goodbye and walked into my building. The lobby was sleek and professional, with my company name etched into glass doors. Walsh Investigations. Truth, technology, results. As I rode the elevator to the 4th floor, I reflected on how much had changed since that December evening when I'd pressed play on an audio file and discovered my husband's voice promising Christmas presents to another woman. The truth, I had learned, is remarkably liberating. It eliminates the exhausting work of maintaining false realities. It clarifies decisions that seemed impossible when viewed through the lens of deception. It allows you to build a life based on what actually exists, rather than what you hope might be true. December 22nd, 2025. Exactly 1 year after the Christmas program. I was reviewing security footage for a client when my assistant knocked on my door. Ms. Walsh, there's someone here to see you. She says she doesn't have an appointment, but she thinks you might remember her. Mary Brennan stood in my waiting area, looking older and more serious than she had a year ago. She wore a simple black coat and carried herself with the careful dignity of someone who had learned hard lessons about trust. Miss Walsh, I hope you don't mind my coming here. I wanted to thank you. This was not what I had expected. Thank me? For telling me the truth. For forcing me to see what I didn't want to see. I invited her into my office and offered her coffee, which she declined. Mary, you don't owe me any thanks. What happened that night was about my marriage, not your relationship with David. But it was about my relationship with David. I was in love with a man who didn't exist. You showed me that. She looked out the window at the city below. I've been in therapy for the past year. trying to understand how I let myself believe such an elaborate lie. How I ignored all the signs that something wasn't right. And what have you learned? That I wanted to believe him because the alternative was admitting that I had fallen for someone who was capable of that level of deception. It was easier to ignore the inconsistencies than to face the fact that I was involved with someone who was systematically lying to both of us. She turned back to me. I also learned that what you did took enormous courage. Standing up in front of all those people and demanding the truth, refusing to let him continue lying to both of us. I couldn't have done that. You didn't need to do that. Your situation was different. Was it? I was being lied to just as much as you were. The difference is that you refused to accept it. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. What are you doing now? I asked. Teaching at a different school. Dating someone who actually is divorced. She smiled for the first time since arriving. Taking things very slowly. Asking a lot of questions. Good strategy. Ms. Walsh, can I ask you something? Do you think people can change? Do you think David learned anything from what happened? I had thought about this question many times over the past year. I think people can change if they're willing to do the hard work of examining why they made the choices they made. I think David is probably in therapy, probably learning about the psychological mechanisms that allowed him to justify lying to both of us for so long. But do you think he's actually different? I think he's probably a more careful liar. Mary laughed, surprising both of us. That's a terrible thing to say. But it's probably true. Real change requires genuine remorse and a willingness to rebuild trust slowly. It requires accepting that some mistakes have permanent consequences. I'm not sure David is capable of that level of accountability. She stood to leave. Ms. Walsh, I hope you don't mind my saying this, but you're nothing like what I expected. What did you expect? Someone bitter, someone angry, someone who hated me. I was never angry at you, Mary. I was angry at the situation we were both put in by someone who thought he could manage two realities without consequences. And now? Now I build security systems that help people protect themselves from exactly the kind of deception we both experienced. I help women document the truth about their relationships. I use everything I learned from my marriage to help other people avoid living in denial. She shook my hand at the door. I'm glad you found a way to turn it into something positive. After she left, I returned to my desk and opened a new file. Jennifer Morris, the woman who had called after seeing the Christmas program video, had just completed a 6-month investigation into her husband's financial infidelity. Tomorrow, we would present her with evidence that he had been using their joint accounts to fund a gambling addiction that had cost them nearly $200,000. The truth, as always, would be difficult to hear. But it would also be liberating. I thought about Mary Brennan walking back into the December afternoon, and about David somewhere in the city, hopefully learning to be honest with himself and others. I thought about Emma in Portland, building a career that demanded integrity and precision. I thought about all the women who had hired me this year to document the truth about their relationships, and how many of them had thanked me for helping them see clearly. The truth is not always kind. It is not always comfortable. But it is always, ultimately, the foundation upon which everything else can be built. I returned to Jennifer Morris's file and began preparing for tomorrow's presentation. Another woman was about to discover that her marriage was not what she thought it was. Another woman was about to face the choice between living with deception and demanding better. I would help her see the evidence clearly, support her through the initial shock, and remind her that the truth, however painful, is always preferable to the alternative. Because the alternative is what I had lived with for 6 months. The exhausting, soul-crushing work of maintaining a reality built on lies. Outside my window, the December sun was setting over a city full of people managing their own truths and deceptions, their own choices between comfort and honesty. I had chosen honesty. It had cost me a marriage, a house, and the comfortable illusion of a shared life with someone I thought I knew. It had given me a business, a purpose, and the unshakable knowledge that I would never again accept less than the truth. The trade-off, I had discovered, was more than fair.